Warning, this podcast contains explicit sexual language and should only be listened to at work if you're looking for an excuse to connect with your HR representative. Additionally, all mentions of the word women include cis, trans, NB, genderqueer, gender fluid, and those still figuring it out. Yes, you are welcome here.
Will you open up with me? These pages, they can feed your innermost desires. Do you feel inspired? Are you getting what you need? Are you coming curiously? A secret safe with me. And here you can simply be yourself. Jace reads romance. Come on in, come on in, come on.
Hi, y'all. This is Jace. She, they, and you found Jace Reads Romance, a community dedicated to empowering women about sex and sexuality through the reading of romance novels. We have a guest that I am fangirling on. You might not believe it, but I have fangirled to Sephi more than once. And I will not do any introduction justice. So please, Mel, introduce yourself and maybe save me from this blush.
Sure. Thanks for having me. I'm Mel. I am the founder of Steamy Lit.
Yay. Okay. For those of you who didn't pass out with excitement, tell us more about what is Steamy Lit, if you've never heard of it. And also, now several years into this, what does it encompass?
Oh, wow. We have meetings about this all the time now because I keep adding things to what I like to call Steamy Lit. I like to call a romance literature collective.
Mm-hmm.
And I say that because we have our hands in so many different pots and things. So initially, Steamy Lit started out as a subscription box. Our whole purpose was to amplify the work of authors, part of marginalized identities, and empower people to talk about their sexuality and embrace their sexuality and kind of start removing that taboo and shame from sex and love and romance and reading romance and all of the things. And then Steamy Lit kind of grew into its own thing. I morphed into this creature, and by creature I say that very lovingly, but really it became a community, most importantly. Authors, readers, and people in the industry, I think, that really stand behind our brand of there are stories out there that are deserving and so worthy of everyone's attention, and we need to do more to amplify those. And so as a collective, we have a bookstore that we just opened in Deerfield Beach, Florida. It's a romance-only bookstore called Steamy Lit, as you may have guessed. We have our Steam Box, which is a romance subscription box. We pair romance books and vibrators, essentially. And then we also have the Steamy Lit Foundation, which is a nonprofit. Our main event right now is Steamy Lit Con, and we're still building that up as far as foundation and that nonprofit portion goes. But Steamy Lit Con, this will be our second year, and it's a romance book convention as well with the same mission, but really creating community. I'm really big on building relationships, and sometimes things that we do day to day are so transactional, and I want it to be more than that. And I want our space to be a lot more than that. And what else are we doing now? We are launching a podcast, Romance Unleashed, which I think we're going to drop our first episode next week. And I'm interviewing everyone, authors, readers, really anybody who I think is interesting and I love. And we're going to talk about books, obviously, but also just romance and dating and sex and relationships and just really being being in a really intimate space with me, essentially. I think that's it that I can share for now. But yeah, that's Steamy Lit in a Nutshell.
in a nutshell. So that is so many things, and I love. Oh my gosh! So I'm gonna pause my fangirl for a moment, but and we're gonna come back to a lot of those things because I'm so excited about them. Because I think that you're correct. These are the conversations that we need to be having, and I think that romance as a genre and the books that we read and the people who write them and the stories that they're telling are the way that we can really jumpstart into creating that world that we want. But let's start at the beginning. Let's go back to the beginning.
Yeah.
When did you when did you start reading romance?
I started reading romance. Such a hard question. So when I was young, I've been a big reader my whole life. Like I probably since I learned how to read. But I think throughout like my middle school, high school years, I more gravitated. I don't even know if these are considered romance. No, but I guess they wouldn't because most of them didn't have happy endings. But love stories, like anything that had any kind of like if they were going to hold hands by the end of the book, I was living for it. Like it could be a subplot of a subplot. Like I just needed that like interaction. And I don't know if you're familiar with Lorleen McDaniel books. Lorleen McDaniel wrote a lot of YA books about kids that were like terminally ill for the most part. A lot of the stories I remember reading were like the brother of someone met someone who's sick at the hospital visiting someone. Someone always ends up dying, I feel like. But they were like these love stories that just like had me in a chokehold. And then later on, I would say at the very early start of Colleen Hoover's career, like when she first started publishing, I would say I started reading her work, and I was like, wow, like I think what I like is romance. Like I think I was searching for all of these like things in other books, but like really my genre is romance. And that's kind of where I started my journey.
Amazing. I just looked up Lurleen McDaniel, and it specifically is like everyone dies. That is,
yeah, yeah,
So you are
yeah.
correct. Everyone dies.
And people, so we have a shelf in the store that is in my crying era, and it's like books that I recommend that have made me cry. And people are always like, wow, like that's a choice. And I was like, if you have been with me since Laureline McDaniels, you know why. Except like Laureline didn't give us a happy ending. All of these books are because they're romance, but whatever.
Yeah. I love that is where you came from. These books of deep emotional connection and then morphed into, but I also want them to end up together.
Yes. Like enough death. Please have a happily ever after. I need that in my life.
Right. So I think we kind of is like figured out what drew you to the romance genre. And you said Colleen Hoover was one of your first. I feel like this is a gateway drug for so many people.
Yeah, I agree.
And I think it's so funny for me, and I'll keep saying this because I was deep into the romance genre before that book series came out. And so by the time it came out, I was like, what are y'all talking about? This is what I've been reading for, at least half a decade.
Right.
But the impact that it has is so real. And once you, I'm going to guess, dove into the deep end of romance, what were some of the things that you started to notice right away? Or what were the things that got you most excited right away and had you just like swimming to the bottom of the pool, if we're going to keep that metaphor?
I think that unfortunately one of the things that I first noticed was like, everyone's white and cis. Obviously, like as a Latina woman, I was like, well, where are there stories about me, right? Or people who are surrounding me in my everyday life. But the other thing I noticed was how much joy it brought me. I like to say that I'm a lover girl through and through. Like I love love. I love loving people. Relationships and connections are, I think, some of my strongest like things in life for me. And being able to find that in romance books, I think was really special. And on top of that, I think there was like something extra special of reading any kind of like young adult romance, because I feel like, I definitely wasn't reading that. I was reading Lorleen. But now there was so much more representation that we definitely didn't have. And those books are so important to like pivot conversations, I think, in our daily life, or like how to handle things in our daily life. And much like romance books, I think too, right? Like there is this universal language of like love and friendship and found family and hurt and tears and all of these other things that we experience on a day to day. And so being able to like maybe see little glimpses of yourself or your stories or things that you have gone through in romance really helps you navigate life and the world, I think, in a much better way, or seeing it from a different perspective. And I think that's what I was like, wow, this is where I'm at and this is where I'm staying. And unsurprisingly, when I dove back in after like Colleen and 50 Shades, it was Kennedy Ryan. So I continued, I started strong with Kennedy, and it's just been a great journey since.
Oh my God. I love the way that you put that. I think, and I appreciate the just call out of what romance was back in the day, which was cis het white. And those are the stories that we were seeing in romance, and those are the stories that we were seeing in the media. And they can't be the only stories, and they don't represent life and love and found family. And I know that that has been a huge part of the creation and the evolution of Steamy Lit. So to pivot into, yes, what it was, and there are things that we can find in those, historically overwhelming cis het white books. What made you go, we can do better, and here's how I can help that?
So this all started during the pandemic for me. And I was very, I think like a lot of the country, appalled and like disgusted with the murder of George Floyd and like the protests around it. And I felt so helpless. Like there was no, like, okay, yeah, I could donate money, but with like my regular 9 to 5 income, like there's only so much money I can donate. And there's only like, how do I create more change? And it was kind of this desperation of like, something needs to change, and I don't know where to change it. I don't know how to change it, but I need to start somewhere. Aside from that, on like another part of that was like, okay, when we're reading romance books, they steer all of these like emotions, like whether it's love or horniness or desire or whatever it is, and like how can we safely speak about this, and what spaces are there for us to safely speak about them? And so I like just made an off comment of like, someone should really pair romance books with vibrators, with like the intention of amplifying authors part of marginalized communities. And a friend was like, do it. And I was like, yeah, I mean, I guess I can. And so I kind of started like researching, how do I order wholesale vibrators? What is already out there? What communities exist? What is happening in that space? And that's how the Steambox came about, with my purpose of being able to donate. So 5% of each box is always donated to different organizations. Sometimes we do that with special editions as well. And I remember very early on, my accountant was like, you're a new business. Like that doesn't even work for like what you're trying to do. And I was like, I don't want to do it if that's not something I can do. Right. Like I created this with the intention of being able to give back and being able to create change. And if that's not what I'm doing with this, then I don't want to do it. There's no point on me being here. And I mean, I think the first year we were able to donate like, I don't know, I think a couple $1,000s, and now we're like past the $10,000 mark of donations that we make to different organizations. And that's probably the work that I am most proud of, being able to create something that is hopefully creating change within the community and what I want to see in romance and in the literary space, but also in the lives of other people. It's something I'm very proud of.
And I want to highlight the fact that you took this idea from a very strong sense of purpose. You had an intention and a goal and a purpose with this. And when, as I'm sure kind as your accountant was trying to be with the typical information that they would give to any regular business of, well, you're trying to maximize profits, that doesn't necessarily align with your purpose. Right. And the fact that you were able to stay strong in that purpose and build something grounded in that why is just admirable in and of itself. And so many people don't have the guts to, number one, start, or number two, when they're told what you're doing doesn't make sense. Y'all can't see that I just did quote unquote. Sorry, y'all. Yeah. Not a visual medium. But when you're told that it doesn't make sense, you step back. And just looking at your face, what I could tell is that made you step forward. Yeah. And that is incredible because it's continued. Also, I do follow her on social media, and it is very funny when her dogs find products in her house. Like I have found the videos. I don't think there's anything funnier than watching a dog who's accidentally found a sex toy.
And this is literally my youngest. Saga is my new addition to the family. Well, she's a year old now, but she is, I call her Lucifer because she is literally the devil. I don't know how this little dog tricked me into getting her because she was so calm, cool, and collected. And she is not calm, cool, and collected, listener, like at all. And, I've always been able to let the dogs into the steam box room and whatever, like it's usually not an issue. But she found the anal beads. And she has destroyed now, and she tears through the box, tears through the plastic, and just whipping around anal beads around the house. And the other day, my social media manager was here, and Saga just runs up to her and throws anal beads at her. And I'm like, oh my God, where's HR? What is happening right now? And then her and my other dog would start playing tug of war with them. And I mean, if anything, it should be an ad for these anal beads because they're Rottweiler approved. They are very sturdy. So.
Oh my gosh. It is, go find Mel, books by Mel. And seriously, it is a bright spot in your day. So I've spoken to this on the podcast a few times. So listeners, my views on why it's important to champion diversity in romance. But Steamy Lit, that has been your goal, and you have existed longer than Jace Reads Romance has. We launched at the end of October. So I would love to hear from you why you think diversity is so important and why championing diversity, especially diversity that isn't you, because I've looked at your books, you are a Latina, but you champion books by other marginalized communities, by people who do not look like you and love like you. And, that is so important and is so gratifying and inspiring to see. So what makes you champion diversity in all of its forms in the romance space?
I think primarily that all of our stories matter and that we are more than our trauma. And there's a lot happening in the world right now. And I think it's true that not one person is free until we're all free. And that doesn't change until we don't start creating change. And something that I would love to tell myself back in 2020 when I felt so helpless was that, great, yes, it inspired me to launch a company that is doing great things. But there was change that I could have created even as that one person. And I didn't see it till now, right? It took me a long time to see that. And so when you think what you're doing doesn't matter, trust me, it matters. Someone is watching. There's nothing more powerful than not only seeing yourself, like, and sometimes I think white people can't even comprehend some of this, right? But because all media has always been about them and their stories and their lives and their representation. And so like sometimes there was a time when I would get like really heated about this and just like start arguing. And then I realized like we're never going to get anywhere if that's always how I respond to things. And so I've kind of started taking a different approach and like having a conversation. And sometimes I don't even think it's like, they go in with the intent of like being these malicious people, but it's just all they've known. And when all you've known is whiteness and no one has challenged it, it's obviously something new to you, right? And I always say, when you come up against something that bothers you, sit with that for a second and see where that's coming from. Like what unbiased or what biases we have that the world has taught us, that culture has taught us, that the people surrounding us have taught us. And like, let's sit with that and unpack it before we respond, right? And so I don't even know where I went off with this tangent. But right. So all you've seen, right, if you are white in America, is that your story takes the center, all of it. And so imagine never seeing yourself represented in movies, books, TV, being prioritized, nothing, right? That's why it's important, because you are not more important than me or the next person just because our cultures or our skin color or identities are different. And I think that that's the most important part of championing romance, is that like we all of our stories matter. And I think from like a Latina standpoint, I feel like I've read throughout the years so much stories about our immigration, which is very important. And also like our hardships, which are also very important. They are what makes us. But there's something so liberating in being able to read about people who are like you getting a happily ever after, receiving love, unconditional love, care, family, friendship, laughter, and that we are more than our trauma and we're more than our hardship. And I think that that's why it's so important.
Y'all, like just like rewind, listen to that again. That's the beauty of romance. I think trauma can be unique in lots of ways. There are certain cultural traumas that different groups and different humans will experience that are unique to that. And I want to respect that. And we want to tell those stories. Those are history, those are truths. But love is universal. And when you see only stories of your hardship, when you see only stories of the cultural collective trauma you and yours have experienced, what you are unconsciously absorbing is that you are not deserving of love, of that happily ever after, that all you will know is the trauma and is the hardship. And what romance allows us to do is see and celebrate people of all kinds, because we want those stories, who deserve and find meaningful love. And when you can see that person, it can awaken that in you. You can hopefully, I think, shed that unconscious, overwhelming, completely oppressive whiteness that our media has given. And I mean, as much as I would love to say that this podcast will topple the patriarchy, I don't think this podcast alone will. But if what this conversation that you're listening to today inspires you to do is not pick up your newest, cishet white author that you've been reading for 20 years. They're great. Don't get me wrong. Absolutely.
Right.
But to go to the next shelf over, to find a story of someone who doesn't look like you or love like you or act like you, who has a different history, and also see that that person is worthy of love, because we are all unfortunately products of this terrible, terrible media. And if the stories that you see, and for those of you who can't see, I am white. I will admit that. I benefit from this terrible, terrible system, and I want to break down this terrible, terrible system. But the stories that media feeds me too are also that people who don't look like me are not worthy of love, and they are. And those unconscious biases, they are sneaky sons of bitches, and they are not worthy of our time, and they are in fact worthy of our destruction, of our effort to destroy them.
Yeah, and I think there's something to say there, right? When you said, maybe don't pick up the cis white het author that like you've been picking up over 20 years. But I think that that's why there's so much, frustration when we're looking at something like the New York Times bestseller list, and you're seeing that, the majority of authors who are on there are white. And then in the romance space, I think Kennedy Ryan was on there for like a week off when she released This Could Be Us. And it was the first time in like 3 or 4 years that a Black author had been in the New York Times bestseller list. And so it's never an attack on the authors who are on the list. And I think that that's something that we really need to like sit with, because there's so much back and forth between like, should Colleen be on there? Should she not be on there? Sarah J. Maas, et cetera, et cetera. Like, the attack is not necessarily on the author. It's on the systems that have made it so. And, like, I think if you're part of the romance community, you can acknowledge that Colleen's work is digestible. Some people love it. They are gateways for a lot of people into romance. And what her books have done for the romance community in the past 3 years has been sensational to watch. But two things can be truth at the same time, right? And so that can be true while she can also be a white author who is privileged and is has received that through the system, right? And so like, it's not to shit on your favorite author. That's never the case, and that's never the intent. But it's like, why has Kennedy Ryan not been on the list for? You know what I mean? Like, if you read Kennedy Ryan's work, you know it. And so sometimes I think as a community, it's almost like we're trying to pivot authors against each other. And it's like, absolutely not. It's just that two things can be true at the same time. And while it's fantastic for Colleen to have had those achievements in her life, because they are fantastic, there's also room to talk about why that list is so white.
Yeah. And that might be another episode. Like, come back. We can talk about why the list is so white. We can do that. That is a worthwhile conversation to be having. And I think a really beautiful point of, it's not to shit on the authors. It's not to diminish their achievements or the validity of their work, or, your love for their books. Like, there are authors that I have read for 20 years and I will continue to love them, and they are white. And I will continue to add new authors. Like, I think if Kimberly Lemming showed up in my office right now, I would faint. I am obsessed with her. And like, my whole brain chemistry changed the first time I read it. That time I got drunk and saved a demon. Like, my whole brain chemistry shifted. But that book would never have been on my radar 5, 6, 7 years ago, probably because it didn't exist. And two, because as a collective, I think the goal is for us to be just more cognizant of what we're buying and who we're listening to and who we're consuming. Because it's easy to buy that author that that churns out 4 books a year and you read 5. So like, there's only room for 1 new author a year.
Right.
But when you can get really intentional about what you're doing and why, there's so much room for growth.
Yeah. And I think that's the key word there, like intention, right?
Yes. I'm going to pause on my questions. I'm going to pivot because I want to champion something that you're doing. Last year you had your first Steamy Lit con. I wasn't able to attend, and I was sad. I stalked it on social media, but I'm going this year. And one of the reasons, oh y'all, like Steffi knows I had the flu when tickets went on sale, and I was like out for the count, and then was devastated. And I got off the wait list. I bought a ticket and then thought it was a scam because no one in the Facebook group was like, I got off the wait list. And so I emailed your team. I was like, did I get off the wait list? I don't know. Like, is a thing. But there are two reasons why I want to pivot to the conference for a second. Number one, it's huge. Do you, like, I know you know, but this conference is massive. You have 180 authors currently on your list to be at this conference. That is so many. And the percentage of them who are not white, who are telling beautiful, unique stories, including men. Like, I don't talk about like men can write romance. Men can write romance is unbelievable, because so many of the conferences that I've looked at, that I've thought about going to, that I've said, no, thank you, they just don't. They have maybe 2 authors of color, and that's it. And so what inspired you to do this? How the hell are you having over 180 authors? And what excites you so much about bringing it? Because it's not just one kind of diversity, y'all. Like, it's not like, oh, it's only Latina authors. Nope. It is every human under the sun is represented in this space. And you can see all the books that are like turned down are the ones that I own but have not read because my physical TBR is too big, but by authors going to this conference. And I would love for you to talk about, like, how did you decide people need to come together and see the beautiful rainbow of humanity and celebrate the beautiful rainbow of humanity in one place for like 2 days of madness?
So when I started Steamy Lit, I kind of had the same, like, I was like, I want to do a convention one day, but I like knew nothing about conventions. I had been in the travel space, so I knew something about like hotel sourcing, but so I told Cookie, which is my co-organizer, and I was like, hey Cookie, like one day I want to do this. And she's like, if you're serious, like you let me know when you want to do it. And I was like, okay, well, let's go to some conventions next year and like just check them out. And Cookie has been going to conventions for years now, so she was not new to it by any means. And so we checked out a few conventions just to kind of see like, okay, what was out there, what was already happening. But it really didn't come from any like grand, like I was just like, hey, I would love to do a convention one day. Like it just feels like something really cool to do. And the first thing that I noticed when I walked into some of these spaces is how white they are. Not only the readers, but also the authors attending, right? And so I immediately knew that if we did anything, it would be with that same intention behind Steamy Lit. It would transfer onto the con. And, you know, the first year it was interesting. The first year was interesting because, and I get it, right? Like you have a new business venture, there's a new convention, people are skeptical, but it was a lot of, and not on the author part. I would say, I think throughout the couple years that I've been in the community, I really fostered great relationships. And I think because of that, like we told authors straight up, like, hey, this is something I'm trying to do, but unless I raise this much money, it's not happening. Can you pay a table fee that I will give back to you if it doesn't happen? And, you know, we had all of these authors who were like, yeah, absolutely. Like, let's do it. And, majorly because of them, it was able to happen because we had their support from so early on that they were like, yeah, let's see what we can do to make this happen. And now going into the second year, it's kind of wild. I think the first year we received, I don't know, maybe about 300 people who were interested. We kind of sold, I think, like 400 tickets at the beginning through like our crowdfunder. And then from there, it was kind of like all the way to like 2 months before the con, we were still selling tickets. Like we were trying to convince people to come. And this year we received over 700 interest forms for authors that wanted to attend. And we have over 2,000 people on our wait list with a sold out event. Like I was like, what? But I think intention, right, has a lot to do with it. Our intention was, one, to create a space for us to connect, for readers and authors and people in the industry to really connect and foster relationships, and not just get your book signed, but like get to know folks, and that's what life is about, like, yeah, you can get your book signed, but what if you ask that person a question? Or if like you see an author who doesn't have a line, like go meet them while you wait for your next author or whatever it is, right? And also obviously the intentionality behind making sure that we had representation in all of the authors that were coming. And there were so many authors, and I think that this was the most important part, and it still is to me, who told us, like, I've never been the majority at any of these events. Like, this is the first place that feels safe and feels like home, and like I'm not an afterthought. And the convention is not perfect. There's a lot of work that we're still doing. We've implemented a D&I committee. We're trying to do things better than year one. Again, I think we all have like biases that are hidden and come up through things. And so we wanted to make sure that through our programming that, we have those check and balances, because last year it was majority just me and Cookie planning the whole con. And I mean, it's a lot of work to take on for two people. But that's what kind of drove me to like continue and to sign a contract for 2 more years, because the words from authors who are Black and brown and queer, who told us how safe that place felt. We had so many of the readers come up to us and were like, I've never felt more like I don't have to worry about being here. Like at the party, I don't have to worry about like dancing. Like I feel like we're all taking care of each other. This is such a safe haven. And that was such a beautiful thing. And I hope that we can continue to foster that, and that we'll continue to do everything in our power to continue to foster that environment, which was a big reason why for year 2, we gave pre-sale codes to everyone who attended year 1. For one, there was a lot of like, you believed in me when no one else did. Like you bought tickets not even knowing if this thing was going to happen. Like you sponsored out of the goodness of your heart and just hope that your money wasn't being thrown out. And so we wanted to make sure that all of those people were put first. And then we opened it up to the general public. And the support we've received for year 2 is unbelievable.
It's insane. Cons were not on my to-do list. So Steffi knows my journey of like, last August, I like spontaneously quit my job and decided this was what I wanted to do and build. And so when I started looking into it, Steamy Lit was one of the first things that came up as like diversity and speech and all of those things. And your conference was sold out by that point. I was like, motherfucker. So I've been following the con since I found it last September. And I'm like, God fucking damn it. But I'm going.
Yeah.
And this, so having been to now and like been more as someone who's entering this space from a different lens, like something that I've been looking for in conventions, in things, in what do I want to participate in? What do I want to lend my voice to? Because no matter what, you're lending your voice. If I'm going to say I went to something, if I'm going to say this was great, if I'm going to say it was not, this might be a lovely convention, and you might have authors that I do like, but I want to see more, and I want to see us do better, and I want to see us grow. And one of the things that you pointed out too, and I don't know if anybody else heard it, but you're in year 2, and I know sometimes it can feel like, well, if this is my intention, then I don't really need to put a focus on it. But you've already talked about making sure that you have outside DE&I committees, because we all have those blind spots. We all have those places where maybe we fall below, and the support system that you're already creating, that I already hear you creating to make sure that you are holding yourself accountable in a very real way is so admirable, because it's easy to step back and be like, my intention is good, I don't need to back it up. Or my intention is good, like I did a really good job last year, like what needs to change? And as you are prioritizing growth and accountability for yourself, how can, when in your business and Steamy Lit and the con and the boxes, and like I can just imagine that this is something that is just prevalent in the whole way that you do things, would never stop. Like in the last year you've launched a con and a physical bookstore. Like, oh my goodness. Let's just like take a pause for that. What are the ways that you would encourage romance readers hold themselves accountable and really step into this space of inclusion and diversity in romance in a way that is sustainable and growth minded?
I think, again, right, like one, intention doesn't equal impact. And so like intention is never enough. For one, what are you doing with that intention, right? And so like, okay, if your intention is to read 5 new books this year by identities different than yours, how can you hold yourself accountable to that, right? Like, how can you make sure that like maybe you're not picking up the newest Emily Henry or Ali Hazelwood, but you're picking up something different, and really and really sitting with that and like why that's important to you. I think if you go in reading something just because you feel like you have to, you're never going to enjoy it. So like figure out what you like, right? Like you like this trope. Okay, figure out who outside of your identity is writing those tropes. And follow diverse bookstagrammers and book reviewers and book talkers, and see what they're reading and what they're recommending. And again, right, we all have biases. So it's not to say that like just because I'm Latina and I'm part of a marginalized community that like all my recommendations will be stellar. Like, no, but like do your research. And I think that that's where a lot of my like reading habits shifted when I created my bookstagram and I really immersed myself in the community. I became more intentional and went after it with what I was reading, and like really like did a little more research on like, oh, who is the author? What is their identity? Like, where are they writing from? And it's only going to take you 2 more seconds. Like, I promise, we already spent like 7 hours on our phone. Like it's not going to hurt. So again, right, I guess I would just say intention doesn't equal impact, and like really figure out what you want to do with that intentionality, and don't force yourself to do something because you're going to end up hating it. So like figure out what it is that you really like, and then just find something outside of your identity.
I love the stepping stone of what do you already like, and find someone who writes that who doesn't look or love like you. Like if you you love kind of a modern paranormal romance like Mia Tsai, Bitter Medicine. It was an incredible one written by an AAPI author. If you love Regency, Amelie Howard is a Caribbean Indian and she writes these. And they have all the same tropes that you would find from Evie Dunmore or even Tessa Dare, but they are written and they represent this other viewpoint and these other authors. Adriana Herrera, she's got, oh my gosh, Caribbean Heiress in Paris. I was like, oh, loved that book. And if you are looking for someone who writes, people who wear corsets, you've got Lisa Rain who writes Scottish Highlanders who are not white. It was incredible. And it takes less time than you think to break old habits that keep you in your same rut. I'm also going to say, if y'all don't take advantage of your libraries, please do, because those librarians, they are fighting for this. They are fighting for you. And one of the best places that I've found new voices are the lists that my libraries put out. Or if you have a really good library system and you're like, okay, well, I did read the last Tessa Dare, Romancing the Duke. What's like that? And look for the thing that's like that isn't on your radar. Okay.
And I will even say, like, some authors, I feel like I mentioned them earlier, but Ali Hazelwood and Emily Henry, I think, are two great examples of authors who use their platforms and their privilege to champion diversity in romance. And like, you always see them recommend other books by identities different than theirs, things that are coming out that they're loving. I think that if that's your favorite author, like, see what they're reading. And, I think that on the author side, like, that's why it's so important for you to use your platforms and your allyship in that way too.
Yeah. Ali Hazelwood is the person who recommended Say You'll Be Mine, which is up on my AAPI. You can't see it. It's up there. But like that's how you find it. And I love that. And also just acknowledging that we should all be championing people who don't live and love like us, because my job as someone with this voice and this platform to say, hey, I know that you're going to look at me and see something, but I'm going to turn your attention to something else because their story is valid and these humans are valid. And we all need to be acknowledging that the world is beautifully diverse. So much of this work that you've done, are championing the diversity that already exists in the romance world. You have showing that even though the New York Times bestseller list or Goodreads shows and algorithms a primarily white space, that it is not, and it is filled with diverse humans and diverse stories that should be championed and should be read much more broadly than they are. But what are your hopes for the future?
What are my hopes for the future? I think a space where we don't have to continue to prove our existence or validate our existence would be great. And I think that starts with readers, that starts with publishers, in creating spaces where we don't have to do that. I saw something the other day that said something like, white people will get applauded for mediocrity when Black and brown people will always have to prove more. And I mean, I see it every day in Steamy Lit. We can't show up like our white counterparts. People will always expect more from us that they don't hold their white counterparts accountable for. And that's in every space that we're part of. That's my hope for the future.
I hope that too. Okay, so here at Jace Reads Romance, we have 5 questions that we ask every single guest. The royal we, collectively, because Sephi and Michael really suffer with me. But the first one is, what is your current favorite romance novel?
Honey and Spice.
Ooh.
It is so good. I live threaded quotes as I was reading it, and I cannot believe the rating it has on Goodreads because it is phenomenal. And anyway, Honey and Spice, everyone needs to read it.
Okay. Thank you. Where/how do you prefer to read?
On my Kindle.
Kindle Human. Love it. So at Jace Reads Romance, we have this idea of comfy, sexy. And it stems from this belief that in your comfiest space, in your grossest pajamas, in bed, in your book nook, whatever it is, you can still explore your sexuality by reading a romance novel. So what does the phrase comfy sexy mean to you?
That I can that I can still masturbate in the morning when I look like shit. I feel like sometimes the feelings of being desired also come from being done up or wearing lingerie and being sexy. And I feel like embracing your sexuality and sexiness and all of that is whatever it means to you, not to society. And if that's you waking up in your grungiest pajamas, then that's what it is.
Yes. Yes. All right. So follow-up question to that. When do you feel your sexiest?
When I'm getting ready for an event, and I'm taking my time to actually, because most of the time I'm in sweats and a bodysuit. But actually getting done up, I think is when I feel my sexiest.
Taking time for you. I love it.
Yeah.
Okay. So what is the one thing that you want our listeners to know about sex and sexuality and diversity? Make it your soapbox thing.
I think kind of what I said earlier, right? Embracing your sexuality looks so different for every single one of us. And, while I can be on the internet talking about the vibrators I just got, that is not necessarily how you embrace your sexuality. And however that is comfortable for you, where you're removing shame and the taboo and all of that societal noise, as long as that is how you're embracing your sexuality, there's no one way to do it. And I hope you find the way that best works for you.
Yeah. Yes. Oh my gosh, Mel, I am so grateful that you took the time after your vacation, after your time away to speak with us. Where can our listeners find you and find Steamy Lit, the store, the con, the boxes, all of it? Where can they stalk you?
Yeah, you can find me at Bookrecs by Mel on Instagram, TikTok, Threads, and then Steamy Lit at Steamy Lit on all of the platforms. And from there, you'll be able to go to all of our other pages.
Amazing. I will make sure those are linked in the show notes as well. Thank you so much, Mel, for taking time to chat with us, to share this incredible thing that you've built and that you are continuing to grow. And I can't wait to see what y'all do next.
Thank you.
That's it for today, y'all. This has been a 3 Paws Productions podcast. Our producer is Sephi. Michael Achenbach is our patient editor. Our theme song is written and performed by Diana Weishauer. You can find show notes and so much more at jacereadsromance.com. That's JAYCE Reads Romance. Follow along on TikTok and Instagram at Jace Reads Romance. If you'd like to ask a question or share a story for the podcast, call and leave a message at 661-JACE-RR. That's 661-529-2377. Or send an email to jace@jacereadsromance.com. Finally, like and subscribe so you can get every episode when they drop. You can also leave us a review to help others find us. And remember, this is Jace holding space for you.